Hey everybody, welcome to our webinar workshop today on form event actions. Appreciate you joining today. I'm just going to go over a couple of things to get started before we jump into it, just to give a few people a little time to join. So today we're going to cover our form event actions tool, Nitro Forms. My name is James Restivo. I'm from Cocaine Software. Appreciate you jumping on to learn about this today. And before we get started, I just want to point out there's this page on our website here that I'm showing for upcoming workshops. Right now, I don't think we have another one quite defined yet, but that's okay. We'll get that on the schedule as soon as we can. And then I also want to point you to some other webinars we have going on more generally. There's this ongoing series regarding our applications. A number of you are using them already, but there's also maybe something you're not familiar with or something you want to learn more about. We have a few on-demand webinars that we've done already throughout the month of April. We have our next one coming up next week for asset management. They're also going to be highlighting in May, we're going to be highlighting a couple of things for our project tracker application. And then we're going to be talking about how we interact with government agencies for government clients that are interested in that. So just a couple of things I want to highlight ahead of getting into the meat of the webinar today, the workshop we're going to go through today. Okay, so one other thing, I think a number of you have been on our webinars before, so you probably heard the spiel, but if there's ever any questions during the webinar, there's a questions box that you can pop your question into. Just go ahead and do it there. I'll check that throughout the webinar, see if there's any pertinent questions we can address during the webinar. If we don't get to it today, then we can certainly get back to you on those questions. This is going to be fairly tech heavy, fairly script heavy, code, not too codey, but a little bit there. So, certainly there might be some questions a little outside my wheelhouse, and that's okay. We'll get those answered offline if we can't get them answered on the call today. Okay. Now, let's go ahead and dig into some of the things that you can do with our form event actions tool, which is in our Nitro Forms Designer. Now, the first thing I'm going to show you, kind of walk through what it's doing first, and then I'll show you how I set it up. So it kind of give you the, kind of work a little backwards, I guess, in that sense, where we show you the end result, and then we show you how we got to that end result. Might be a good way to do it. So we're going to be using our assets tool demo. We're going to be using our purchase request demo today, just to show you, kind of orient to you what you're seeing. The first thing we're going to take a look at is this event action called execute script. And that one is fairly straightforward, so I'll show you what you can do with it. So the first thing is I'm going to go to this asset I created for this webinar. We're going to go edit this item. And then when we are setting the asset category, we'll see what happens. So we come in here, we go to asset category, we hit vehicle. Now it's going to prompt. So this is happening through that form event action tool. We're getting a prompt here where we can enter a lease number. Let's get 1, 2, 3, 4. We're also going to get an alert to remind the person to upload a lease or contract to the vehicle info folder. This is obviously could say whatever you want it to say. Then we're going to get another alert just to kind of confirm that things were done. So pretty simple, pretty straightforward, and I'll show you how we set that up. So if we go into our Nitro Forms tool, and we're happen to be working on this edit form today for the assets list, we're going to go to our form event actions, and you can see we have this show pop-up for vehicle info. So that's the one we're working with on this one. So going here. So this is, you have some options here at the top for the form event action. This can happen on form load or it can happen when a column value changes. So this is really about dynamically showing or changing things or providing prompts for users on the fly and kind of outside of what you can do with the standard SharePoint or standard Nitro Forms options. So it gives you a little more power, a little more oomph in what you can do, a lot more flexibility. So in this case, we're going to go execute this action on when a column value changes. And this column value happens to be asset category. We could have this action run on any other column value change. So if we wanted to You'll see that in another example I'll show you in just a little while. But you could have multiple columns here that anytime one of those columns changes, it checks this action and runs it. It's going to have a check for the condition. And then when we look at the new action here, you'll see there's 3 options: executing a script, updating form controls, and fetching items. So this one is just a simple execute script action that we're going to run. Nothing much more than that. So you come in here and you have a script. Now, if you're not familiar with JavaScript, it might look a little off-putting at first, but really, honestly, I actually didn't know much about JavaScript as of this morning. I spent all morning learning it, and it's pretty straightforward. It's actually pretty accessible, and there's some resources out there, and I'll point you to those a little bit later in the webinar. But I actually just pulled this down from a website, and what we're doing, you can see here's the prompt that we got. Please enter the lease number. It gives a prompt field, and then we can enter the number, and then we can do something with that number we've entered. It could also just very simply be a window alert. You can use this window alert function just to simply throw up a message to the end user that say, hey, we got to do something, or remember to do this, or a reminder, whatever it might be. Something changes on the form, then they have to go do something else, right? So that's what the alert might be, just be simply saying do something. You have to remind you to do something. But this is how it's working. So you get the prompt, you get the alert, please remember to upload, and then you get the another alert that basically just takes that text value that was entered and presents it and just says, hey, here it is. This is what you entered. We're using variables here, pretty straightforward variables, pretty straightforward condition, comparisons and things like that. So it's pretty, like I said, it's pretty accessible once you kind of dig into it and spend a little time with it. You can learn this stuff pretty quickly. But yeah, so it just is really simple prompt and response. That's it. So you can do that. You can also take this, execute script action further, and you could change your CSS. So JavaScript could impact the HTML of the page. And you could even show a different background on the form if you choose this vehicle category, or if you choose another type of category, or whatever the field that is updated, whatever that value might be. If you want to change the look and feel of the form, even as far as the color scheme, certainly that's possible. Just inject some CSS into your script here, and then say to set the values, and on the fly, while the person's on the form, they'll see that change. They'll see that happen. So it gives you a lot of dynamic capabilities. But yeah, pretty straightforward, execute script. When that thing changes, so it's a little different than our custom actions. It's a little different than our script button. The button you have to press to do something, and then there's also a script you can put on the form. Here you see this custom JavaScript option. So this is just basically taking that same concept and putting some more parameters around it to say this script is only going to happen when you make this change, rather than when the form loads or when you press a button. It's kind of happening in the background in that sense. And that's kind of true with all these different types of actions we're going to look at. So another really great use case is if you're doing calculations on the fly. So for our asset example here that we're going to talk about, you might want to maintain an inventory. And that inventory you might want to draw down as you update numbers. So what I'm going to show you over here is that I've added just minimize this window. We added another tab. I just added a couple of fields here for inventory, items in stock, and items in use. So let's say our total inventory is 100, and we know we have 50 items in use. Hey, there you go, items in stock, automatically calculated. Let's say we go out and buy another 100 items. We want to put them in our inventory. Say 200. There, items in stock is automatically updated. And if we wanted to change the number of items in use, you see that it maintains that calculation there. And so again, we're doing that through update form controls. And so this is going to be a script on the form controls. Now you can see you could use that in other scenarios where you have maybe a tax calculation for purchasing. You want to make sure that that number changes every time a price changes. Things like that could happen. And the way we set this one up is if we go into our update items in stock form event action here. So this one, like I said, we could do this on when other columns change. So we get the happening when the inventory changes and when the items in use changes. We could also run this on form load, so that could default values. I'll show you that on the new form in just a moment. But again, just a simple action, update form controls. That's all we're doing. And we're gonna open up our action here. And so the column, whenever we're doing an update form control, we're specifying a column that we're going to be updating. So in this case, we're going to be updating the column called items in stock. We're going to be taking the two numbers, relevant numbers, the inventory and items in use, and then doing a calculation on them. So real simply, what we're doing here is we're taking a variable of inventory, we're getting the integer of that inventory field, and then we're using it later in the process. And one important thing to point out here that you're going to see or you might want to use in when you're doing these update form controls based on other values in your fields, in your form, this right here is a common thing, kind of specific to CCS or Crow Canyon, where you're taking that form, looking at the UI of that form, and what field do we want to look at, okay? So it's going to take that field, we're going to specify the field that we want to look at and get that value out of that field. So that's the control we use. And then this part right here is going to be the column internal name. So the column internal name, as you're probably aware, is what you first create the column with in SharePoint. So you might go change it later, but that internal name never changes. Usually we recommend to not use any spaces when you first create the column, and then you can go back and add spaces later, because you can see here I created it with spaces initially, and it creates this kind of like, not so pleasant UI for looking at it. It could just be items in use, no spaces, none of this X0020, but I create it with spaces, so I'm stuck with this, and that's what I got to deal with. To get this number, to get this value, and again, you might be aware of this, but I just want to point it out. If you go to the item itself, or go to the column itself, you can see here's our items in use custom column, sorry, not custom column, but items in use SharePoint column. We come over here, and it's going to show a little differently in Edge than it would in Chrome. Usually you want to use the Chrome internal name. I don't know why the internal names are different, they just are. But this is, you can see this at the end of this URL, this is what that column internal name looks like. So if you're ever in doubt, ever in question as to what was that initial column name created with, you come into these list settings, edit that column, and then you come over here in the URL and see what that original name was. So go back to our actions here. So we're just taking our two integers here, inventory items in use. We're creating another variable called stock. We're just taking that inventory variable, subtracting the items in use variable, and then returning that stock variable. And that return is what the value is that's going to be in the items in stock field. As you saw, that's going to happen every time you make the change. So it's going to rerun every single time, keep you fresh, keep you updated. And that's going to work a little better probably, or in some cases might work a little better than the standard SharePoint calculated columns. Although you can do similar functions with the calculated columns, that calculated column won't show on your field and on your form until you save it. That calculated field only appears in the display form. What we're doing here is we're taking that calculation and doing it on the fly on the edit form. And we can even do this on the new form. So it just gives you a way to show those things right there for your users without having to save the item, then come back to and find out what that calculation was. All right, let's see. Just trying to see if any questions yet. Looks like we're good on that. Okay. So another example of this update form controls, another use case, is to default a lookup value. So in normal SharePoint, you have a lookup column, and it is just going to show you the none values. Let me show you over here. If we go to our asset, again, we're going to hammer on this forward. You can see that the asset type is a lookup, and the selection here is none. There's a couple others in here. If we go to vendor, you can see the selection is none. It's a lookup column, so it's just going to be like that. And SharePoint doesn't give you a way to set that out of the box. So again, with a fairly straightforward form event action, we can set that for your form. So I'm going to switch over to our new form. with me for a minute while it gets over there. Okay, so on our new form, we're going to default the vendor to a certain value. Because maybe that's our vendor of choice, or we always use that vendor, or just 99% of what we buy is going to be through that vendor, whatever it might be. We do an execution on the form load, and then really simply, it's just going to be set vendor to Crow Canyon. Going to take this, open this up, and we're not using script action here. We're just directly setting the value for that field. So you could do that as well. If you just want to directly set the value for a field, you can do that through these settings here. So really simple, really straightforward. Now, if we go back to our asset list here, let me close out our edit form and open up new. This is already published and should be working. Okay. So go over to history finance. You see that we set it to automatically default to Crow Canyon system. So that's what we set as our default, and that's what it appears as rather than none. So it gives you an option there to predefine those things. All right, so let's see, make sure I'm not missing anything here. Yeah, so that's pretty much straightforward for that stuff. For updating form controls, again, you can do it through calculations. You can do it just directly setting values. So different things you can do there. Now, the third and final action you can do with form event actions, and for this one, I'm switching over to our purchase request page, and we're going to do a little different. I'm going to show you the form event action first. That comes up. Actually, let me just pop over and show you what it's doing. So in this case, what I've done is I set that form event action to pull in all approvers from another list into this purchase request. So we open up our purchase request new form. And in this case, maybe the person, we want to see who's going to be approving this form. We don't want to just trust the system and just go and do it. We want to know who this is actually going to go to. And we want the user to verify that. So if we come in here and select sales, you'll notice what happens is that we automatically get all this information. So this is all actually coming from an approvers list that's in our program. I don't know if I have it open. I probably don't. But there's an approvers list for this purchase request. And so it's pulling all that information from that approvers list. So it's just showing it to the end user. Now we can take that information and do something with it. We could maybe run workflows on it, or maybe run custom actions on it, whatever we might want to do. But the key is we got that information from another list and we brought it here into this form. So again, if they go and change it, you see that if we go to finance, you see that the numbers change. Or if we go to HR, marketing, or whatever, IT department, you'll see that everything changes. And if we go back to none, it just takes out. So how are we doing that? Let's go over here. So we're doing this form event action. We're going to do it on column change, and we're going to do it on department. So in this case, we're going to, there's no conditions on it, so it's just always going to run. But the key here is this fetch list items action. So we're going to open that up, and this is a pretty powerful tool because what we're going to do, it works very similar to our query list tool in custom actions or workflows, if you've seen that one. You're going to give it a title. It gives you this variable name that's not changeable. That actually is that's going to always be CCSQL and then whatever name you put up here in the title. What are we going to get? We can get item, or we can get an item collection or items, and then we decide where are we going to get this information. So in our case, the approver information is stored in this departments list. We have a lookup on our purchase request to department, so we can simply use that lookup column. We could use some of these other options to get data. We could do list view or query builder, or just a straight up camel query if we want to just directly create that camel query. We could do that. So you have a lot of different possibilities here to get how you get the information. And then we got to do something with that information. So this is where the script gets a little more complicated, but it's really not that bad once you get into it. So if you come down here, you'll see that it's a little more complex, but essentially what we're doing is we're saying we're taking that fetch items variable that we just created, that CCSQL get approvers, and we're creating this variable called approver1, approver2, approver3, or whatever, and getting the information from our list. And we're getting a lookup value because it's a person or group column, so we have to use the get lookup value. Because you'll see down here on the amount field, when we're taking the amounts, we don't need to have that lookup, so that piece of it's not needed. But again, we're just getting that information and pulling it into our variables. We can then use our variables to create this string, and essentially all we're doing is creating this nice long string where we're concatenating all this information. So you got the space, $ amount, then we level 1 approver, then we got a return. All that's in here creates a nice long one, and that creates that block of information that is appearing here. All right, and then we hit return. So you do the return approver. So that part is always going to be there for the fetch items. Do whatever you need to do at the top here, get it into a variable, then return that variable as the results of the actions of the script, and that's what's going to populate in whatever field you set up here in the column. So again, I mean, you could take this and go to, go execute script. I mentioned you could change colors around, you could impact your CSS. We could use this possibly to, use the update form actions, form controls to calculate a due date. There's some articles we have on our website to calculate an end time when you have a start time and a duration field. So similar to what we're doing with that items in stock, items in inventory, you can take that calculation and calculate out an end date for it. So it could be used for projects, maybe creating tasks, things like that, where you can, on the fly while you're editing the form or in the new form, you can manage these things. So one of the things about it is that it's really geared towards the new and the edit form. Although you can use it on the display form in the execute on form load, that would be your only option in the display form. But you could also do that where you do something when that form loads. Of course, if you're doing that, you might just use the custom JavaScript option over here. Kind of a 6 of one, half dozen the other, depending on how you want to do it. But again, it's kind of geared more towards that new and edit form. Some other examples that we could look at. I wanted to calculate due date based on SLA settings. You could do that. If you want to parse information, one thing we just did recently, we could use I forget the function name, but you can take a string, like part of a string, and put it into something else. Another one we did recently for one of our customers is you could actually do use a regular expression within your JavaScript function to parse things and make it look formatted in a certain way. I think we did something with MAC address for that for one of our customers. I started configuring it in preparation for this webinar, but didn't quite get it working ahead of time, so I'm not going to be able to show it on the fly. But the idea here is that you can, I'll just show you what it looks like. So just execute script, and essentially what it's, so this one is, just taking the information you've entered into that MAC address field. Again, you see that, here's that CCS form UI, fetch control value UI to reference the field value. And then it's going to take that field value and do some things with it, take out some characters and then put a colon after every 2 characters, stuff like that. It's going to slice it and set it to only be up to 17 characters. So it can do a whole bunch of stuff. And so if you're not familiar with JavaScript, or if you you want to try doing some of this stuff with scripting, I found this website here at w3schools.com. It's got this whole JavaScript tutorial. It's got some really great examples, it's kind of simple examples to more complex stuff where you can start putting things together. Free resource that you can just go out and take a look at and reference as needed to figure out how to get that JavaScript going and making it work for you. So it's a great thing. And like I said, I knew somewhat some of the principles of JavaScript this morning, but honestly, I dove in and just spent my time working through it, and I got a pretty good idea of what you can do with it now. You can see how powerful it is and what you can how you can really take your form, a combination of these JavaScript functions and your form. You can really take it to another level. We try to give you as much as you can through the form UI as possible. But where you get stuck or where you kind of can't do things with what we've got in there, you can take it to the next level with this JavaScript function and the form event action. Now let me check in on our questions box. Looks like we're good. All right, if anyone has any questions, feel free to pop them into that questions box, and I will do my best to get them answered. And I'll just we're waiting for that. If there's anyone has any there, that's if not, that's fine too. You can always shoot us an email if something comes up after the fact, and learn more about this. Like I said at the beginning, we have our workshops. We're gonna have another workshop coming up in May, yet to be determined. If you have any ideas on what that should be, if you have anything that or any other topics that you think we should cover in these workshops, feel free to send us an email. We'd love to hear from you. Love to hear what your experiences are with Nitro and with CroCanyon, and anywhere we can improve our services, anywhere where we can better serve you through these workshops, webinars, or otherwise. We're happy to help. Again, I'll just pop open our webinars for the upcoming product webinar series. And again, I highly recommend coming into this project tracker one. We don't have the registration quite open yet, but once we do have it there, just definitely want you guys to join that one. As always, these sessions will be recorded and available on demand, and you can always reference these later. And if you have any that you can't find or want to webinar you wanted to get some information on that we've done that we don't have up here, you can certainly just let us know and we'll get you the information you need. And so I guess with that, let me check. So I guess with that, we appreciate everyone coming on and learning a little bit more about the form event actions tool and what you can do with it. One other thing I want to point you to before you go, and I think you're probably familiar with this already, but if you go to CroCanyon.help, let me just type in form event actions. You'll see some examples of these things. You can get the add custom functionality here, Article 610. So we've added some things, and we keep, as we get use cases coming into us, as we find these to be useful for our customers, we'll keep updating these articles and keep updating this information with common scripts and common things that we think are going to be valuable for your uses. But again, if you don't see it, let us know and we'll get you the information you need. So great. All right. Well, thank you everyone for joining today. I really appreciate it, taking time out of the day. Hope everyone is staying well, staying safe, and we will be talking to you again soon. All right. Take care, everybody.